Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Bapak Bapak dan Ibu Ibu. I'm Kristiarto, National President of the Australia-Indonesia Business Council. The AIBC is honoured to co-host this event with the Indonesian Embassy in Canberra and look forward to a lively exchange of ideas. The theme for today is Indonesia and Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership amidst COVID-19, which is very timely and relevant as we draw closer to the ISEPA, only 31 days away from entry into force on the 5th of July. This agreement has its origins back in 2007, and many on this call today, included, have been on this journey for many years. Who would have anticipated, though, the global circumstances we will find ourselves in at this time? Today's event will examine what ISEPA represents and how things are likely to play out as both countries strive to get the agreement off to a strong start, and what new and perhaps unexpected opportunities are emerging. It is great to have so many on this call, over 300 I believe, and it's encouraging to see the developing interest in trade and investment between our countries, particularly with ISEPA about to come into play. In this age of Zoom virtually, with people joining us from many locations and time zones. We have with us on this webinar representatives from DFAT and Austrade, the Indonesia-Australia Business Council, our partners in Indonesia, representatives of state and local governments in both countries, consuls general in both countries, both of our embassies in Canberra and in Jakarta, Australia Awards scholars, Indonesia Institute representatives, our partners at the Australia-Indonesia Youth Association, but also our partners at the Australia-Indonesia Centre. So quite a broad representation today. It's my great honour now to introduce Ambassador Legowo to formally open this event and provide his welcoming remarks. Before he speaks, Ambassador Legowo has served as Indonesia's ambassador to Australia since June 2017 and has served a distinguished career with the Indonesian Foreign Ministry. Before his current posting, he served as Secretary General of the Foreign Ministry, Ambassador to the Philippines, Chief of Staff and Spokesperson for the Foreign Minister, Indonesian Ambassador to the Holy See and the Vatican, member of Indonesia's permanent mission to the United Nations in New York, and has also previously served as Deputy Head of Mission in Canberra back in 2004 to 2007. He holds a Bachelor of International Relations degree from Gadjah Mada University in Yogyakarta and has many awards to his credit, including the Order of St. Gregory Magni from Pope John Paul II and Satya Lencana Karya Satya from the President of the Republic of Indonesia. Ambassador Legowo has become a very dear friend, and we've enjoyed many joint opportunities to bring Australia and Indonesia closer together. Welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, Pak Kristiarto. Thank you so much for your kind introduction. Yang saya hormati Pak Wisnu Wijaya Soedibjo, the Deputy Chairman for Investment Cooperation, Indonesian Investment Coordinating Board, Ibu Stephanie Fahey, CEO of Austrade, Ibu Nimade Ayu Martini, Director for Bilateral Negotiation of the Indonesian Ministry of Trade, Ibu Shinta Kamdani, the Deputy Chairperson of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce, Pak Bryan, Director of Trade and International Affairs of the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and as I understand, this webinar is also participated by our Consul General all over here in Australia, our Consul General in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, and also in Darwin. Distinguished gentlemen, a very good morning for those of us in Indonesia and in the western part of Australia. Good afternoon for those of us in the eastern part of Australia. First and foremost, welcome and thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us into this webinar on Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership amidst COVID-19. I am so grateful and honored that I can be with you today to commence our discussion on how we can move forward to advance our economic partnership between Indonesia and Australia amidst COVID-19. Pak Jokowi himself has given instructions to us, Indonesian diplomats, that we have to enhance Indonesia's trade and investment collaboration with our partners all over the world, including Australia, one of the most important neighbors of Indonesia. And this was further emphasized during Pak Jokowi's state visit to Canberra in February this year. The visit had been a very productive one, with the conclusion of the plan of action to the comprehensive strategic partnership, as well as the establishment of the roadmap for the 100 days implementation of IASEPA. Unfortunately, this has been difficult for us to follow it up on this this commitment with the corona pandemic taking place. But that is why we are here today to venture into an exchange of ideas and thought on what we can do to still achieve our objective. It has been a difficult couple of months for all of us. Wherever we are in the world, we have to navigate through a situation that none of us had anticipated nor experienced in our lifetime. In the world where borders had blurred, where relationship between countries had relied on people-to-people contact, we have been pushed to rethink how we conduct our business in light of this global pandemic. Global trade has been disrupted, with global supply chains being heavily delayed and industries in a number of countries being suspended to contain the spread of COVID-19. Whilst Australia has begun easing restriction, international travel remains prohibited, and residents must still abide by social distancing protocol. In Indonesia, we have started to introduce measures to implement the new normal, an effort to keep the Indonesian economy running while maintaining restriction to contain the spread of COVID-19. Indonesia's new normal approach follows closely the global protocol set out by the WHO to ensure that countries taking steps to ease restrictions and transition toward the new normal must make sure COVID-19 transmission is controlled and the communities have a voice and are engaged in the period of transition. Despite these challenging circumstances, I'm pleased to inform that the relationship between Indonesia and Australia remains a strong and resilient one. Indonesia and Australia continue to remain close partners and friends in sharing best practices, exchanging information, and collaborating in a lot of areas to address this global pandemic. In terms of our economic relations, Indonesia and Australia have seen an increase in our bilateral trade and investment during the first quarter. Again, I need to emphasize during the first quarter of 2020. Australia has invested $86 million in 321 projects in Indonesia. This is an increase of 31.9% compared to that in the first quarter of 2019. Indonesia export to Australia has been valued as $511.6 million. This is an increase of 7.67% compared to that in the first quarter of 2019. Australia's export to Indonesia for the first quarter of 2020 is valued at $1.4 billion. And again, this is an increase of 21.3% compared to that in the first quarter of 2019. Even so, we must brace ourselves for the second quarter of the year in which trade and investment is projected to decline due to this global pandemic. In the face of these economic challenges, as I understand, both governments have taken measures to assist the economy in the form of multiple economic stimuli. Indonesia has provided 405.1 trillion rupiah to assist the Indonesian economy. And as I understand, the Australian government has issued also a stimulus amounting to 320 billion Australian dollar to overcome the impact of COVID-19 on the economy and to ensure that it remains resilient post-COVID-19. We also have a new ACE card that will come into play in the middle of the year that will further augment our bilateral economic partnership. As we all understand, as of 5th of July 2020, the long-awaited IASEPA will enter into force. I've repeatedly mentioned in various fora, IASEPA will provide further preferential treatment for Indonesian and Australian business, building upon what has been in place from the ASEAN-Australia-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement. 99% of product exported from Australia will be able to enter the Indonesian market free of tariff. Indonesian product will enjoy 0% tariff into the Australian market. In light of this development, the time is ripe for us to take full advantage of IASEPA coming into force to advance our economic partnership. With IASEPA entering into force, we enter a new phase in our economic partnership, one that is more comprehensive and encompasses not only trade and investment, but also economic cooperation, connectivity, e-commerce, something that I believe will make our nation even closer. As I have previously stated, the global pandemic has shifted the way the world works, in particular, our global supply chain. IASEPA provides a wide window of opportunity for Australia and Indonesia to collaborate in rebuilding the supply chain to the benefit of our economies. Indonesia offers a large market for Australian agricultural products such as meat, fertilizer, and barley. Additionally, Indonesia and Australia can further collaborate in agricultural sector under the economic power hub concept of IASEPA to produce high-quality products for export to the third country. Our government have also established a number of mechanisms under which we can work to implement IASEPA to its fullest capacity. The first of which is the 100 days IASEPA implementation program agreed by Pak Jokowi and Prime Minister Morrison, setting out several programs that will propel the benefit and opportunity provided by IASEPA. And these include trade mission from Australia to Indonesia, visit of major Australian companies to potentially invest in Indonesia, CEO roundtable, developing a trade and investment blueprint for Indonesia, implementing the working holiday visa quota for 4,100 Indonesians. Secondly, prior to the signing of IASEPA in 2018, we had also jointly issued several early outcome programs for IASEPA that allows us to benefit from the agreement. The early outcomes include collaboration in several key factors: financial services, food innovation, fashion and jewelry design, food and drug standard, herbal, spa, aromatherapy, and red meat and cattle partnership. Although all the implementations of those measures above have been delayed due to this global pandemic, it remains important that we gather input and discuss how we can best carry out these programs when it becomes feasible for us to do so. Therefore, discussion such as the one we are having today become an important platform for representatives of relevant institutions in both countries to present ideas on how we can best proceed forward despite this global pandemic. So before I conclude my remark, I would like to once again thank our keynote speaker, Pak Wisnu, who has taken time out of his undoubtedly busy schedule to speak to you today. Our distinguished panelists, Bu Stephanie, Bu Made, Bu Shinta, and Pak Bryan, our friend and colleague at AIBC, BKPM, the Indonesian Ministry of Trade, including their Australian counterpart, our colleague in IIPC Sydney, ITPC Sydney, our Consul Generals, and last but not least, I would like to thank you, Pak Phil, for all the support that you always render to our undertaking. I'm confident with the panel speakers that we have today, we will be able to delve into greater depth and detail about the potential that remains unexplored for economic partnership between Indonesia and Australia to further prosper. I wish you good health and I look forward to a fruitful discussion. So having said that, I have now the honor to declare that the webinar of Indonesia on Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership amidst COVID COVID-19 officially open. Thank you so much for your kind participation, but more importantly, thank you so much for being part of the better relations between Indonesia and Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. To deliver the keynote address, I'd like to introduce Bapak Wisnu Wijaya Soedibjo, Deputy Chairman for Investment Cooperation with the Indonesia Investment Coordinating Board, better known as the BKPM. Today, Pak Wisnu is representing Chairman Bahlil Lahadalia, who unfortunately is unable to join us today. Pak Wisnu has served with the BKPM since 1998 in a range of roles, including his current role as Deputy Chairman for Investment Corporation since July 2018. He's also served as Director for Region 3 in the Project Implementation and Control, a Deputy Director for Bilateral Cooperation, Europe-America Affairs, and Deputy Director for Transportation and Telematics Industrial Planning. Pak Wisnu holds postgraduate diploma in Development Studies from the Institute of Developing Economies Advanced School at Japan External Trade Organization in Tokyo, a Master of Management degree from the University of Indonesia, and also a Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering from Trisakti University. Welcome, Pak Wisnu.
Okay, very good afternoon, not good morning, since majority of the speakers and participants, I can guess that many more from the participant from the Australia. I will be very much delighted to address the message from our chairman, Bahlil, who is unable to join with us in this webinar forum because he's still in the meeting with the president with the cabinet for the some important issues. So again, before I'm reading the message from the chairman. Thank you very much, His Excellency Ambassador Kristiarto Legowo, for inviting BKPM in this very, I think, a very punctual moment for BKPM when the coronavirus pandemic it's about to over. It's about to over. So. Suppose that it will not be on such a long lasting, but at least from the Embassy of the Australia puts a high concern of the implementation of the ISCPA since it was ratified by the Parliament. So again, let me read some message from our chairman Bahlil. Yes, please. Some presentation will be helping you for understanding the message in with some description. So again, His Excellency Bapak Kristiarto Legowo, the Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia for Australia and Republic of Vanuatu, Pak Imam Pambagio, I guess he's joining us, and I heard that Ibu Made also. Mrs. Stephanie Fahey, Ibu Shinta Kamdani, Bryan Clark, and then also my friend Bilateral. So and then distinguished investor speakers and the other that I cannot mention one by one. So good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I'm pleased to honor. I'm pleased and honored to join you all on behalf of the Chairman BKPM. I would like to extend our sincere gratitude and appreciation to the Embassy of the Australia, Republic of Indonesia in Canberra to organize this important webinar forum and for inviting BKPM. Our Chairman also sends warm regards and sincere apology that cannot join this meeting. So today I'm here to share with you about the Indonesia latest economic performances, or strategies in boosting investment and performance, and the development of ISCPA amidst COVID-19. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm going to skip some of the macroeconomic indicators that I think all of you have already known. So let me share with you about the investment performance in Indonesia. The first quarter of the 2020, we managed to achieve the 210.7 trillion rupiahs, contributing about the 23.8% of the total realization target. So of the total 2020 target. For the first time this year, the domestic direct investment surpassed the foreign direct investment by contributing 112.7 trillion, or about 53.5% of from the total of the first quarter of the investment realization. So this figure shows that Indonesia economic resilience remains strong. As for the Australia's investment performance in Indonesia, as His Excellency Ambassador said that BKPM recorded that FDI from Australia recorded as much as $86 million, contributing about 1.3% of the total FDI realization in the first quarter of 2020. So to maintain this momentum, BKPM has set 6 key performance indicators. These 6 indicators are the strategy to survive the pandemic, as well as boost the investment performances. So among the 6 are the currently targeting or executing the large investment realization, and then improve the ease of doing business, and then encourage the large investment to make a collaboration with domestic and SMEs player. And then we also try to distribute the quality investment. And then also we are now more focused on the investment promotion, focused on the sector and country base with, of course, more specific sectors. Then the last of the 6 KPI indicators, we gonna try to increase the domestic direct investment participation, in particular for the SMEs. So we also have to boost the FDI inwards during the pandemic. BKPM also continues and to approach the foreign investor who are interested in investing in Indonesia through video conference and online licensing. We are also continue to facilitate companies which have issues in licensing by directly coordinating with the related ministries, government institutions, including local government. So in executing these strategies, we conduct equal treatment, of course, which applies to all countries. As for the domestic direct investment, BKPM commits to support the local businessmen and SMEs. We had signed an MOU between BKPM and the Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises in the context of accelerating investment licensing, exchanging data and information to increase investment realization, and facilitate the state-owned enterprises companies that may collaborate with any investors, including foreign investors. This MOU will provide a platform that create a partnership between local and foreign investors with the SMEs. Honorable participants, in addition to the strategy mentioned above, BKPM proactively facilitate the companies that handling COVID-19 through the chairman of BKPM Decree number 86/2020 on providing ease of business licensing for certain business fields that handling COVID-19. BKPM will facilitate companies in regards to reduction and or facilitation of business licensing requirements, acceleration on the business licensing process, and special assistance services for the licenses in medical equipment, pharmaceutical, and supporting industry as well. So aside from our struggle in keeping the conducive investment climate during COVID-19, the presidential instruction number 7 of 2019 last year was issued to give authorization for BKPM in terms of business licensing delegation. So this regulation, of course, will enable BKPM to provide a much faster licensing processes. This presidential regulation, in summary, allowed BKPM to coordinate corrective measures to improve EODBs. So, and also evaluate the implementation of business licensing and investment facilities executed and provided by the ministries and institutions, and then also facilitate and provide services to the investors in managing their business licenses and providing investment facilities. And also this regulation prepare norms, standard procedures, criteria, or NSPK of business licensing and granting investment facilities delegated by the ministries or institution. All in all, BKPM in the front line and accelerating ease of doing business. And then for that, we are still doing all the development. So, ladies and gentlemen, in light of the IACPA, of course, we all the witness the long and winding negotiation of both parties that have been through the finally get to reach the implementation after the ratification. And then allow me to remind you that IACPA covers trade in goods, including rules of origin, custom procedures, trade facilitation, technical barriers, and I think the speakers from the Ministry of Trade will also acknowledge you with those features of, those distinguished features set in the IACPA. So in the area of trade and commerce, we can see from this figure that will be also presented by the Ibu Made. I guess well, still there are still plenty of room to make improvements on the trade balance. Of course, as a result, will be believed to lead the increase of the investment performance. So in the area of the investment, again, the IACPA provides, of course, a better ground, good or greater certainty, not to mention about the better treatment, of course, through specific commitments in the key sectors, including energy and infrastructures, some payment of fair compensation where an investment is expropriated, and then the investment or related capital transfer can be taking place freely and without delay. And also the IACPA as the very substantial figures among the CPA that we have formed or we have done is of the better ISDS provisions, very complete ISDS provision. Of course, it was put as a modern procedural safeguards to better balance the right of the investors to bring a claim with the right of the governments to regulate. So it also requires arbitrators to comply with rules on independence and impartiality, including on conflict of interest. The agreement excludes the frivolous claims and claims arising from the investment that has been established through illegal conduct. Of course, with the very good relation between the Australia and Indonesia, including the good relation among those businesses, of course, the ISDS provision may not be taken. I mean, it must be put as the land of the last resource, as the amicable solution can be put forward for those or such a claim or dispute. So, in general, the ISCPA provides an access of expanding market access, increasing competitiveness for the agriculture, fishery, industrial, and forestry products, as well as competitiveness of the Indonesian laborers, increasing two-way investment between Indonesia and Australia that we are expecting now, and increasing broader collaboration to optimize utilization of the agreements. So this CIPA also provide specific benefits in the area of trade, investment, and Indonesia's human capital that we are looking for. So in the context of the regulation, regional development, the CIPA provides opportunities for the regional businessmen to market their products to Australia, and also collaborates as local partners for the Australian investors who like to invest in Indonesia. It also provides opportunities for Australia's investors to explore various investment opportunities across various regions in Indonesia. So it is expected to encourage more equitable investment across Indonesia. Recently, ISCPA has also bringing about several investment interests in the education sector so far, and the Australia may collaborate with the Indonesian startups for the alternative job creations and making social impacts. Those opportunities may come up with the COVID pandemic situation. So this would be a good momentum for the Indonesia and Australia businesses. So honorable participant, before concluding my keynotes with some genuine ideas of what ISCPA could benefit as post-COVID-19, Indonesia exports will expect to enjoy 0% tariffs. Hence, it will improve Indonesia trade balance with Australia, as well as in terms of in the field of investment. To access to the information and application of technology, so it will increase productivity. This agreement will allow us to improve our human resources competencies. So above all, the ISCPA provides a sense of protection of the investment from both sides. I would like again, last but not least, to reassure that BKPM is committed to always providing the best services to the investors through regulation or reforms, expediting or licensing process, formulation of incentive and assurance of giving investors a protection and equal treatment. So again, last but not least, allow me to invite you to invest in remarkable Indonesia. So for those who has a problem in terms of the investment field, please do not be hesitate to contact BKPM, to contact our staff directly as they are ready for you. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Wisnu. We now come to the panel session of this webinar, and our panelists today are Ibu Made Ayu Martini, Director of Bilateral Negotiations at the Indonesian Ministry of Trade, Stephanie Fahey, the Chief Executive Officer of Austrade, Ibu Shinta Kamdani, Deputy Chairperson of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, KADIN, and Bryan Clark, Director Trade and International Affairs with the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Each panellist will in turn share some perspectives, followed by a Q&A session. Already we've received many questions to put to the panellists, but please share any that you may have in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. Themes to be explored today include maintaining the goodwill and momentum that we have achieved in the lead up to entry into force of ISEPA on the 5th of July, particularly amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Preparations for effective ISEPA implementation, delivering mutual benefits for all stakeholders in Indonesia and Australia, and implementation of the 100-day roadmap proposed for ISEPA during the visit of President Jokowi to Australia earlier this year, again in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd now like to call upon our first speaker, Ibu Made Ayu Martini, Director of Bilateral Negotiations with the Indonesian Ministry of Trade. Again, before welcoming Ibu Made, she has served in many roles in both the Ministry of Trade and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and has served in her current role since 2016. Before that, she has served as Director of Strategic Issues at the Ministry of Trade, Director for Trade and Policy Harmonisation, again with the Ministry of Trade, Chief of Staff to the Minister of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia, Tom Lembong, who of course is a very dear friend to us all, Indonesia Trade Attaché at the Indonesian Embassy in Washington, DC, and as Assistant to the Minister for the Trade of Republic in Indonesia, Mari Pangestu. Ibu Made holds a Master of Science in Politics of the World Economy from the London School of Economics, a Bachelor of Science in International Relations from Gadjah Mada University in Yogyakarta, and has also studied at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Welcome, Ibu Made.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Phil, for that very impressive CV. You don't have to read it all. First of all, let me thank Ambassador Pak Chris for inviting me to this very important webinar, very timely. Also to other speakers, Pak Wisnu, who represent the chairman of the investment board. Good to see you, Pak Wisnu. Ibu Shinta, Ibu Stephanie, Pak Bryan, and also Pak Phil, our dear friends who's moderating today. It's always, and of course, I don't see in front of me, but I know Ambassador Chris said that our Consul General, Consulate, everybody are here. I see there are around 241 participants here. This is great. So it's always give me a great pleasure when talking about Indonesia, Australia, SEPA. Not because I help delivering the agreement into life, but really to me personally, and also our institution, Minister of Trade, this is probably our window of opportunity. That's why I put that into my presentation. Really, this Indonesia, Australia, SEPA would be was a bridge, but now we pass a bridge. And how can we use this golden window opportunity for the benefit of our two countries? And I hope, by the way, you like my Akubra, is it, hat that I put on my presentation. I took this picture in February during the visit of the president. So I figure this is a nice opening, I think, to use. Okay, can we go to the next one, please? So this is all a milestone, right? So we agree, no argument about it, you know, a milestone because of many reasons, you know. One, this ISEPA is a step up from, as Ambassador Chris just now mentioned, ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand FTA. So it's wider in scope, more comprehensive in nature, and also more liberal, meaning that we treat Australia better as a partner than any other, and also vice versa. This is a milestone, right? And relatively, well, it's not bad. 7 years of negotiations. It was not easy, but we are very happy with the result. And now, in 1 month from now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to enter formally, officially into force. That means all the market access, the rules that we've been discussing or negotiating are going into force. Next, please. It's a milestone, but there's a but. Before that, please. There is a milestone, but okay. But Indonesia is not even, or not yet, perhaps, you know, Australia top trading partners. When you see the numbers, we are not even top 10, unfortunately. Yeah, Indonesia is number 15 for Australia in terms of trading partners. Of course, we don't argue about China. That's the biggest, $158 billion. Indonesia is only $7.6 billion. Less than Malaysia, Thailand, or Singapore in the region, you know. So I think this is something that our leaders, our ministers, our trading, our private sector are aware of it, and we would like to bring this to correct the situation so we can be at least top 10 and if not top 3 in the future, because we can. There are a lot of rules, but Wisnu just now explaining quite elaboratively what are the commitments or deals that we put on the agreement that we can benefit from. Next, please. So talking about trade, can we? Okay, it's a bit. Let me use okay. So in terms of trade, yeah, of course, trade deficit is not something that we as a government look into as a, you know, a policy consideration when we talk about trade agreement, because trade agreements you are opening your market, and then deficit or surpluses is part of the reality. It depends on the structure of your economy and the product. At the moment, however, for many in public, almost 3 billion US dollar deficit is something that we in Indonesia would like to correct or improve. For us, for government, it's better to be a great trading partner. We import more, we export more. That's certainly the direction. But in terms of relations with Australia, with AIBC, actually it's beyond goods. We both, the negotiator understands this is Australia with 25 million people. You know, the market is established, it's already open. Indonesia, of course, it can grow, 270 almost million, yes. But beyond trade, what we'd like to see is investment and services. And of course, with it comes the partnership. This is something that I'd like to emphasize in my presentation later on. Can we go next? Again, when we talk about trade only, so in comparison, as I mentioned earlier, performance of our trade with Australia compared to our neighboring countries are not in ASEAN, I mean, it's not as impressive. Next. Okay, this is why the milestone that we've been upholding and as a pillar of our negotiations is something that we really, after July 5, has to implement it and really be understood by both sides, by the private sectors, by the government, by the people, because there are P in the SEPA itself. It stands for partnership, and for us, trade is not a zero-sum game. It's actually a positive sum game. Everyone can benefit. Everyone can be the winner. So this is why something that in many of my presentation, our outreach to the public, we say the opportunity is there. It's up to us how to use it. Next. So I'd like to bring, which you probably hear a lot in the past or now will be more even, is the concept of economic powerhouse. So during our negotiation, this is something that we would like to work on together between Australia and Indonesia, because because of the differences in economic situation, the structure of the product, the complementarity of the product, and also services and investment, we could become a powerhouse. And this concept is actually embedded in all of our chapter in our agreement. Some examples, of course there are more here, you know, I think Bu Shinta can also elaborate later. There are more that we can do, but during the negotiation in the course, what we can identify as some of the example on food and beverage or industry, food industry, whereby Australia has some product or not resources that we use for production that we can export to the third market, not only to the Australian market, but more to the third market. In that way, both Australia and Indonesia can be a player, strong player, to be a powerhouse. Those are the example. And secondly, I think for the future, on electric car, this is something that, of course, is not easy, but I think it's doable. I know private sector already discussing it, how we can be partnering in establishing or building automotive in the region for Australian market and also the third market. Next, please. So C, after partnership, now we talk about comprehensive. This is why we say, even for Indonesia at the moment, this agreement is the most comprehensive. So the window for Australian to invest, to partner with Indonesia is now. There is no better time for us to do a partnership together, because soon enough, Indonesia will have agreement with EU. EU is also comprehensive, but we're still in round 10, and there will be more time before we reach conclusion and then the ratification process. So to lay down the pillar or cooperation, this is the time. After 5th of July, we need to maximize, utilize all the comprehensiveness of this agreement in terms of goods. Okay, we have, Pak Wisnu already mentioned, Ambassador just mentioned, you know, 100% of Indonesian product to Australia will be 0% this year, July 5, almost 94.6% Australian product to Indonesia. In terms of services, we identify, this never happened. Never in our trade agreement that we have this liberal. If I can say it here because this is Australian public, you know, but Indonesia may be more robust, that we can use, and very specific, that we, Indonesia, never give to any of our trading partners. So use it, because otherwise it's going to be too late. On investment, the same thing. Pak Wisnu just now mentioned, right? A lot of commitment we already put there. Not only market access side, but also rules, you know. This makes you, Australian partner and Indonesian, are at ease in doing business with Indonesia. And then economic cooperation, never underestimate this. I think this is also a very important pillar. And let me say here, from the government side, we are very pleased negotiating with Australia, because I think Australia is one of the few countries in the world that believe in this cooperation under agreement. Not all countries believe and uphold this principle, but we manage now. We are preparing now under Bapenas this all cooperation program that we do under AIBC. This is on top of our bilateral cooperation that we've been doing since our, you know, the diplomatic relationship, put it that way. And then also the last, that's also something unique, I would say, in our agreement is human capital. It is true, because this comes with market access, with partnership, that this human capital, Pak Wisnu already mentioned just now, two things that we've agreed to come out from this agreement is on the health sector, healthcare industry and sectors, and also education. This is something I think very, very important for the future of not only Indonesia, but I think Australia. When Indonesia like study in Australia, when or in Australia and invest in Indonesian education system, see what we're gonna get in 10 years time. A strong Indonesia and a strong Australia. Next, please. So that's C in comprehensive. Now, maybe not many knows about this, but I think the one that familiar with this, we also have some MOUs and side letters to even amplify the agreement itself, and a lot of them relate with the human resources development that I was referring to. There are side letter on work and holiday visas and TVET, training, vocational education, and also health and engineering, and also MOUs on how this is a lot of argument, right? How we can improve, Indonesia improve the human resources in Indonesia so that Australian can benefit from, because eventually you will invest in Indonesia, you need good people, you need good human resources. This is something that both countries can do. So all of these side letters, MOUs, are strengthening what the chapter and the agreement that we have. Next, please. Okay, so amidst COVID-19, the upside, I would say, from this, I know the projection is quite grim everywhere. The World Bank, IMF, WTO, all predicting the global economy will be slashing. Indonesia included, Australia, I also believe, but there are always what people say, crisis makes a good policy and also a good reform. And we hope certainly this AIBC is that opportunity that we could grow together using this AIBC in goods and services in economic cooperation. Next. I think I just passed my 12 minutes, but I have a little bit more. If it's okay with Phil, next. Okay, one area that I would like to underline here, I think everyone agree, but sometimes we overlook this, trust and understanding. I was in Perth, I think many ambassador was there also for the AIBC socialization. I think Phil also there, yeah. Bapak Tan Sri Abeng, our former minister and also CEO, saying something that struck me, and I think it's very true, that we now, because we have a milestone agreement now, we need to improve our trust and understanding. During negotiation, this is something we would like to, one of the objectives actually of our agreement is to improve trust between our two countries. After this, now that we have a legal document, we are sure that we're gonna be fine and safe to invest, to do business, and so on and so on. So this is the trust comes in, and understanding. I think we need more. We need more. I know people-to-people contact are good already, but sometimes maybe the relationship in Canberra is great with Indonesia, but out in the States, this is something we need to, from time to time, reach out, more Bahasa Indonesia school maybe, more promotion on Indonesia and vice versa. And this is something that never underestimate, because it's not in isolation. Trust, understanding, people to people will help the whole pillars of the agreement. Last one, I think, yes. Conclusion. Let me conclude that July 5, grab, seize the opportunity, use it, because it's not going to be long. Other trading partners, we are negotiating now with currently a 9 agreement, and everybody, all our trading partners, look at Austrade agreement, because it's now available in the public. They will say, hey, Indonesia, you give it to Australia, give it to us. We may go down to that. So that means use it, plan it, and strategize. Secondly, partnership. This is something that I think I elaborated a lot for mutual both Indonesia, because we would like to see that Australia see Indonesia not only as a market, I know we are 270 million, but we are a true partner. If Indonesia is strong, Australia will be strong as well. So this is something, the powerhouse is very important to be really implemented. Thirdly, it's very small, I don't see. Economic powerhouse, I mentioned just now in the trust itself. Okay, that's 4 takeaways that I'd like to share with you. I'm ready for discussion later on. I think last one is just a link for the document. If some Indonesian, they don't know about they are here, and what are procedures that we have for export to Australia, the ROO, the certificate of origin, and so on and so on, and also the Indonesian trade promotion that we have in Sydney. I think, Pak Phil, sorry that I passed the time. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Bumara. Your enthusiasm is wonderful. Now we hand to Stephanie Fahey, the Chief Executive Officer of Austrade, the Australian government agency responsible for promoting trade, investment and international education, tourism policy, programs and research. Stephanie has over 30 years experience, both as an academic and executive working in Australia and overseas, and was previously EY's lead partner for education in the Oceania region, Deputy Vice Chancellor for Global Engagement at Monash University, and Director of the University of Sydney's Research Institute for Asia and the Pacific. Dr. Fahey brings an international perspective to her work and a wealth of experience across business and academia. As Australia's first female Chief Executive, Dr. Fahey has also served on the Australia-China Business Council, the Australia-China Council, the New South Wales International Education Advisory Board, European Australia Business Council, and the Board of the Canberra Institute of Technology, the Foreign Affairs Council, and Australia Career Foundation. Stephanie holds a PhD from the Australian National University and Bachelor of Arts with Honours from the University of Sydney, and was inducted as a Fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors in 2012. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you very much, Phil. And can I say at the outset how pleased I am to participate today. And I'd like to thank the Embassy of Indonesia and our very good friend, the Ambassador, a great friend of Australia. I'd also like to acknowledge the keynote speakers and my fellow panellists. But I'm very much looking forward to the discussion as well, so I'll try to keep within my 10 minutes. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm standing today. And I'm coming to you from the Canberra office. So I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people on whose land I'm standing today, and to acknowledge their elders past and present. I'd like to just make a few points, and I hope they'll be useful. The first point I wanted to make is that we've come a long way over the last 7 years to arrive at IACPA, and it's coming into force on the 5th of July. Many of us have waited for many years, but what I'd like to emphasise today is that although we've arrived at this point, the real success of IACPA is what happens from now. So it's all of our responsibility to actually bring this agreement to life. So governments can work together to arrange the agreements at government to government level, but really the success of IACPA will be driven by business. So government is the enabler, but the people who are doing business, both trade and investment, are the ones who will bring IACPA to life and to success. And I was very encouraged to hear the words, "This is a real step up in our relationship." This presents a window of opportunity, a unique window of opportunity. And the relationship now between Australia and Indonesia is more preferential than between any other two economies that we're engaged with. So all of the building blocks for a successful engagement in economic terms between Australia and Indonesia, all of those are in place. Now we need to work hard to bring it to life. So we know that there's a plan for the first 100 days. And when that plan was articulated, we had no idea that COVID-19 was going to strike the global economy and our two countries specifically. So we had in place a number of activities in the first 100 days that the ambassador outlined. So we talked about a ministerial-led business delegation from Australia to Indonesia. We also spoke about the Economic, Trade and Investment Ministers meeting supported by senior economic officials. So another example of a meeting, a face-to-face meeting. The third was a CEO roundtable where businesses from both countries actually came together and talked about opportunities and what next steps could be. We also agreed that there would be an escalation in information sharing. But most of these activities in the first 100 days require face-to-face activity and travel, and we know that's not going to happen in the next 100 days. So then the challenge to us is how can we be innovative in this time, because COVID-19 requires us to think differently, and to think differently not about the what we're wanting to get from the relationship, but the how in the short term. And I was very pleased when Shinta and KADIN came to my office in Sydney late last year, and we talked about how we can actually bring it to life. And Shinta suggested to Austrade and challenged Austrade to enter into co-design activities with KADIN to actually try to think in a very innovative way of how we can reap the benefits of this fantastic, absolutely fantastic agreement, unprecedented agreement between our two countries. So what I'd like to do is to suggest that we need to put the building blocks in place for when we can do face-to-face meetings, but we can't wait until that's available to us. So how we need to communicate and how we need to build those relationships is exactly what we're doing today and initiated by the Embassy of Indonesia here in Canberra, that we need to increase our connectivity via digital platforms, via having these types of calls, but we need to actually amplify them because on their own, they're not enough. So where we would have had a face-to-face, we might need 5 of these types of interactions to get the same impact as we might have with face-to-face. So I've challenged my team to think about the innovative ways in which we can deliver on the promise of the first 100 days, but to use innovative techniques by which we might be able to deliver. But what I'd like to do now is just to focus on 3 areas very briefly: education, business investment, and innovation. So a number of the speakers today have already spoken about education and skills. We know that education is a capability of Australia. It's a major export from Australia, where we are world respected, globally respected. And we also know that the President of Indonesia has said that skills and skill development is a major focus of his in this second term. So there's complementarity between the two economies immediately. And we have, under AIBC, opportunities to actually cement that relationship. We have many Australian alumni from Australian universities in Indonesia. And we shouldn't underestimate how important these people are, because when I visit the Austrade office in Jakarta, we have 12 staff who are locally engaged. The first time I visited the office, I went around and I asked people, where did you graduate from? Majority had graduated from Australia. So the understanding that our staff have in our Jakarta office of Australia is very deep, profound, and they're fantastic representatives for the Australian government. And I encourage business to follow that lead. So we have a number of Australian alumni across Indonesia, and it's those people who know Australia and where that trust that everybody's been talking about in terms of investment and trade, that trust comes from understanding of each other's culture. So I think education is a critical element of IACPA. We have a couple of Australian universities who are locating in Indonesia. There are a number of vet providers who also want to locate in Indonesia, and under IACPA, universities can be 100% owned. Vet providers can be 67% owned by Australia. So it provides a context which is unprecedented and very liberal towards Australia. The second issue is around business investment. And business investment comes from commercial opportunity. The Australian government can provide, well, Australian government and Indonesian government can provide the context, but it's really business that makes it happen. And as we've heard, there's only about 10 billion Australian dollars invested in Indonesia. But I think people often underestimate how investment happens. And when I think about investors coming to Australia, they come, they invest, and then we grow their investment. We encourage them to reinvest in Australia. And that's exactly how it works in Indonesia as well. Australian investors are going to Indonesia, and then the idea is to maintain that investment and also encourage businesses to grow their investment. And I see that there are opportunities for that precisely under IACPA. And my final area that I wanted to speak about was innovation. And I think this is the untold story of Indonesia. When I visited, actually I visited together with the Prime Minister when he was only in office in this new government. I think he'd only been there for a day and he was on the plane to Jakarta. So I've had the opportunity to visit Indonesia many times, but every time I go, I look at the digital innovation across the country, and it's extraordinary. And the number of unicorns that Indonesia has in the digital space is also incredible. And Indonesia has more unicorns than Australia. So this provides a very good foundation for increased investment, increased cooperation, and it provides a very good bridge for Australia and Indonesia to collaborate, especially over these next 6 months to a year where travel might be impeded. We really need to grasp the opportunity of our digital connectivity, but not only that, it's the businesses that have digital product to sell on both sides. So I look forward to investigating those three opportunities in education, business investment, and innovation. So on that note, I'll pass back to you, Phil.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Next, we've got Ibu Shinta Kamdani, Deputy Chairperson at KADIN, the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Aside from this important role, Bu Shinta is owner and Chief Executive Officer of the Sintesa Group, where she's responsible for the management and expansion of the group's business interests in Indonesia. The Shinta Group is an Indonesian group with 16 subsidiaries which operate in the property, energy, industrial products and consumer product sectors. Shinta is involved in numerous other activities, including as the Vice Chairwoman of the Employers Association of Indonesia, APindo, President of the Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development and Indonesia Business Coalition for Women Empowerment, and as the founder of Angel Investment Network Indonesia and member of the APEC Business Advisory Council Indonesia. Shinta has earned qualifications from the Barnard School at Columbia University in New York and Harvard Business School. Shinta has many awards and accolades, including being included in Forbes Asia's 50 Most Powerful Businesswomen in 2012, 13 and 16, and 30 Best CEOs by Business Indonesia Awards in 2015 and 2017. Welcome, Shinta.
Thank you, Phil, for a nice introduction, and I would like to bid my say to everybody here with me and everybody in Australia. Thank you for this opportunity. Perhaps I'm going straight to the point, so I'm going to look at it in two angles. First is maybe touch a little bit on the COVID-19 and how this has impacted, how this is going to impact basically our ESG plan implementation, and how actually we can reap the benefit of I'm going to be a little bit positive, so I'm going to say reap the benefit while we have a crisis. So, and I told my colleague that actually right now we really don't have much excuses because the agreement is done. So unless we can implement things very quickly, we don't see that all the work that has been done over the years, we can reap results. So I think we need to do and do the work very quickly. So, okay, is this can we start from the beginning, my presentation? Okay. Okay, so actually I just want to give a sense of if you can start from the beginning. Can you start from the beginning? Okay, just very quickly. Okay, so first slide, I want to show you, of course, the trade outlook. First slide, please. Oh, I think I better operate myself. Or... Okay. Okay, so I think from the WTO trade outlook in April, definitely there's the plummet, but I want to just share that the optimistic scenario, we can control if we can control the pandemic globally, we can shrink by only 13%. But unfortunately, the worst case scenario, it will drop up to 32% in 2020, although rebound is expected in the year of 2021. So this is the current condition of COVID. And at the end, and the interesting part is at the end of April 2020, rebound, WTO record significant increase in trade restriction associated to the pandemic. This is very interesting, and countries have harder to meet an essential supply of goods such as food, medical equipment, pharmaceutical, and harder for business to have functional and efficient supply chain. The US-China tension will continue to constrain global trade recovery and growth, and in 2019 alone, US-China trade war has shrunk global trade growth by 3%. So this, I think we have seen the trade and political tension with US-China, and this will obviously impact that as well, or prolonged stress, although it will create some opportunities for all of us. I think all this constraint of the global trade outlook signify that business is facing higher and intensified competition in the global trade. So we always think of this as a survival of the fittest. So only the most efficient and the most connected businesses to global trade that will be able to survive. Now, next, if we look at the despite the bleak global trade outlook, I think Indonesia remained the most optimistic economies in the world towards recovery. I think our McKinsey Consumer Confidence Survey in April 2020 found that Indonesian consumers are more optimistic towards economic recovery. And we are projected a GDP growth by a lot of different institutions, very big gap, but at least there are a lot that are still projecting us to have a positive growth in 2020. So this indicates that Indonesia demand-driven economy remains healthy and thriving despite the huge stress currently caused by the pandemic. Although we are feared that we have a negative growth in second quarter, we are optimistic that we can avoid it if most of the industrial area in Indonesia entered the new normal as soon as possible. So this is what we are waiting for now. Actually today for Jakarta is the decision by our government whether they're gonna extend the PSBB or the lockdown, or hopefully starting with the new normal. And if you can also see that in this table, the next table, that Australia CPI is the only green one amongst Indonesia's main trading and investment partners like China, Japan, EU, and the US. So this means that the growth of demand in Australia is positive, while the other countries expecting negative growth. To be more specific, the consumer demand in Australia still grow positively despite these trade war conditions. And this means that in comparison, Australia market is one of the most promising for Indonesian business expansion abroad. Now, how can actually IASIPA assist businesses to address the following issues? Next slide, please. So IASIPA, I think, can assist business to boost first the business productivity and efficiency in supply chain and overcome higher global trade competition as trade liberalization and effort to standard conformity in IASIPA may significantly lower tariff and non-tariff barriers between Indonesia and Australia, when other countries have to increase this. Second, the trade war and a major disruption in global supply chain throughout the pandemic creates demand for higher diversification and supply chain and export market for business resilient purposes. So IASIPA can actually assist Indonesia business and Australian business to diversify its supply chain and export market to each other due to this low barrier. The third is the post-pandemic consumer behavior will change in this post-COVID era, and business need to adapt to it. Bilateral cooperation in IASIPA can help Indonesian and Australian business to adjust the changing market through exchange of information, trade facilitation, economic cooperation, and etc. The post-COVID market will also have higher demand to healthcare services, it was mentioned before, which one of the key cooperation subjects in IASIPA. And this definitely we can utilize and benefit from. The greater investment market access in IASIPA have very potential to answer also the demand for job creation in both countries. And lastly, the pandemic accelerated the trend to adopt technology and Industry 4.0 business. I think IASIPA cooperation, particularly in skills and education, can assist business to address these needs. Now, if we see next slide, the IASIPA will enter into force by July 5th. For Indonesian business, it means all Indonesian export goods that meet Australian standard can enter Australia market with 0% import duty. I present to you here the top 20 commodities which have been identified by the International Trade Center as potential export from Indonesia to Australia. They are motor vehicle, wood paper, plywood, coffee, rubber, cocoa, palm oil, apparatus for television, footwear, jewelry, and many others. So these are some of the great export opportunities. Now, I want to give you also next some of the sample of investment opportunity for Australian businesses to come to Indonesia. I think beyond trade, IASIPA will definitely give greater facilities for investment, and that was mentioned also before by Pak Wisnu and Ibu Made. So IASIPA Indonesia certainly try to welcome more investment from Australia. I thank Stephanie especially that we have the discussion on how to attract more investment also coming to Indonesia. There are some investment market access which are newly provided for Australians in Indonesia. I must inform you that in order to enable this investment market access privilege for you, Indonesian government obviously have to make some changes in our domestic regulation, particularly in health and higher education services, which are traditionally very resistant against foreign investment. So this is also a major leap for Indonesia, major transformation, and definitely we can now look at specifically in these two sectors that Australia are interested in. Now I want to go next to some of the this IASIPA cooperation opportunity to increase business excellence. I think this is some of the early outcome. It was discussed many times before, so I don't want to go through in detail. But as you know, we do have some existing economic cooperation, and 3 of this cooperation, especially on the Food Innovation Center, fashion and jewelry design, as well as and food and spa cooperation, are already running at the moment as the early outcome. The Innovation Center, for example, is affiliated to our to the Association of the Food and Beverage, and this is something that we are already currently doing. There's also a skill exchange cooperation, as mentioned before, and Indonesia and Australian business can send and exchange their employee to have on-job training or upskilled in Indonesian company or Australian company. Obviously, due to COVID, this might be the pilot program, which is currently for banking, insurance, mining, engineering, might slightly delayed. Now, the most important right now, I wanted to share with you what we are actually currently doing. I find that, of course, we have done many socialization, and there have been many of very positive feedback. Many Indonesian businesses are excited to take the opportunity of IASIPA, but how can we actually do it? And I think most important what I find is to have a platform or to have ways in actually business can reach out and be facilitated. So we have actually in KADIN set up a task force especially for the IASIPA implementation, and we have proposed actually programs also to be included under the IASIPA economic cooperation. But this is not just for the economic cooperation. We feel some of this area we also be focused for the enhancement of trade and investment. So first, if we look at the investment acceleration program, I wanted to first give you example on the agri-food. So for example, right now we are mapping each of these area, which specific projects that we will be able to do. When we talk about project, there is already interest from the Indonesian and the Australian. So we're not just talking about ideas. This is something that we really need to follow through. So for example, on the agri-food, we have the Agriculture Solution Cooperation. This cooperation is aimed to bring in regenerative farming system on cutting-edge advanced biomineral technology from Australia to Indonesia. We also have a project which is the lobster aquaculture production based out of Tasmania. So this is really a specific project. Ibu Made mentioned about the economic powerhouse. Yes, this is very important, Bu Made. And I think on the beef cattle partnership, this is definitely the way we are looking for now with more import of beef cattle. We are also looking at project Indonesia, Australia, in which we can export to the third country, as well as the instant noodle as an example. These two, we are also very much involved, especially on the beef cattle, because we believe the opportunity is very large, and we are also identifying also already existing players from both sides that can do this project. The second example also on the education and knowledge-based economy. Now we find that business-to-business cooperation is important, and we have an example for recognition of prior learning. So this is business-to-business cooperation for recognition of prior learning. This cooperation is aimed to adopt Australian RPL to certify Indonesian skilled yet uncertified manpower. So this program is intended to bring together Australia, RPL institution and Indonesian, and it's actually ongoing at the moment. The second is education artificial intelligence. So the cooperation is aimed for learning enhancement with proven proficiency in AI system development and tracking of learner performance based on applied understanding. And there's also advanced applied postgraduate program in Industry 4.0 based out of Victoria. So this is very specific project that we're looking at. On the tourism side, we are looking for hospitality vocational school investment. There's one that we're looking in Bali specifically. There's also a marine tourism corporation that we're looking with certain Indonesian companies and Australian companies. Also on the e-commerce digital trade, there's e-commerce fintech based on out of Victoria that currently are looking with Indonesian companies as well. Now, I want to also highlight as well the investment on the medical equipment and pharmaceuticals. So actually on medical equipment specifically, we are also currently looking with Australia. There is an interest of investment on manufacturing here in Indonesia, and it's still a long way to go, but at least definitely the interest is there for specifically for the health equipment, medical equipment. Now, on the second aspect, which is the trade acceleration program. On the trade acceleration program, first is the Indonesian Trading House. So this program is aimed to establish Indonesian Trading House in Sydney to promote Indonesian goods and brands to Australia market and accelerate the inclusion of Indonesian goods into Australia's supply chain. So when we visit Australia the last time when we with our president, we have many discussion with the TPC also in Australia, in Sydney specifically, and we have actually now set up a team, our team, Indonesian team in Australia, in particularly Sydney, to look into this project. So this will enable business to business as well as B2C transaction. And the main beneficiary, it will be the Indonesian producers and exporters. There are many that we identify here in Indonesia, but their readiness for export needs to definitely be assisted, especially on the SME products. Now, some of the products that I can mention will be agri-food, wood products, plastic product, garment, footwear, packaging. At the moment, we have the listing of companies that we are currently working with on the one that we are supporting to utilize this trading house. The second is Indonesian Go Global. This program is aimed to assist the promotion and marketing of Indonesian brands and goods of export quality to be more known in Australian market. So priority beneficiary of this program will be Indonesian SME and the local brand. Many of them are ready, but again, of course, need to be supported. And we are currently also working very closely with the Ministry of Trade, as well with our ITPC to look into this specifically. And the third is market entry assistance program. There have been workshops conducted also in Indonesia to help Indonesian businesses to export to Australia and introduce Australian standard on goods to Indonesia business through exchange information and provision of simple explanation on market standard to Indonesian business. Also, secondly, provide technical assistance, good by goods basis for Indonesian export to meet Australian standards. So standard is a very important part of this export, and we definitely, the Indonesian SME need a lot of support on this. We also look at the opportunity for them to go into the distribution channel. So through some of the retailers in Australia, they need to be connected. So again, these are just some of the examples, but I see also the Indonesian Food Innovation Center will become a hub in innovation to support Ibu's business in both countries in the implementation of global value chain concept. So these are some of the area that we are currently targeting and working on. So on each of these, we have already person the task force, and what we are now, of course, COVID doesn't help us that we cannot mobilize ourselves there, but these are perhaps next. I want to close with some of the ideas that while we are now constrained from actually freedom to move around, I think definitely we can look at exchange information through digital and indirect physical interaction. And I think what is important right now that we have the team that is actually working on this from both sides, from the Indonesia and the Australian side, as well as put up a program on each of the project that we are currently putting forward in how we want to develop the timeline in terms of to make this happen. So I'm very much looking forward to again to deliver. So I think we have talked a lot, we have discussed a lot, but I always said at the end we have to deliver. So this is something that I think all Indonesian businesses are ready, and we are looking forward to work with the Australian side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bu Shinta. Rounding out our panel session is Bryan Clark, Director Trade and International Affairs with the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Bryan's got over 25 years experience in international policy development and a demonstrated record of achievement as an industry advocate, particularly in international trade, agriculture and climate change. Bryan's frequently invited to speak at national and international events regarding free trade and rules of origin. His previous roles include as a Director of Keeley Clark Proprietary Limited, Manager of Industry Development at Grain Growers Association, CEO of the Murrumbidgee Horticultural Council, CEO of Newfield Australia, CEO of Riverina Food Group, Deputy Director of Rice Growers Association of Australia, and previous involvement in family farming operations near Griffith in New South Wales. Bryan's also a member of many important international forums, including the Indonesia-Australia Business Partnership Group, International Chamber of Commerce World Council, ASEAN Business Council, and Standards Australia International Policy Advisory Committee. Welcome, Bryan.
Thanks very much, Phil, and welcome. Hello to everybody. Thank you for the invitation to speak to you today. And I know that time's getting on, and perhaps people are getting a little tired. One of the benefits of going last or being the last speaker here is you can cover off and know that a lot of things have been covered. So I don't have a structured presentation, but I was really wanting to try to fill in the gaps of other presentations and maybe offer a few ideas to the group. So The first one I was really pleased about was the emphasis that Ibu Marty put on comprehensive economic partnership. And through our work in the business partnership group that assisted to hopefully bring some of the business ideas into the negotiations, this was a running theme. We had that in mind all of the time. It's not about a free trade agreement so much as the comprehensive economic partnership idea. And we need to sow that seed, and we need to grasp hold of that seed, because as Ibu Marty also said, Indonesia is negotiating other agreements, and so is Australia. So this agreement, it has a time and a place, and if we miss that window, which was mentioned before, then it will be overtaken by other things. So Indonesia and Australia are also members of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which is also concluded and also moving into entry into force. And it has, you know, other aspects to it, some more beneficial than there is in IASEPA. The same thing as the existing Australia, ASEAN, New Zealand Free Trade Agreement, which has different benefits than the IASEPA. And trading community, particularly in goods, needs to understand what the differences are between those. This is where some of the difficulty comes, is it's very hard for businesses, and particularly small businesses, to understand what those differences are. And so we need a return to something akin to the business partnership group that existed. And you've seen some of the members of that group here today with Ibu Shinta and Phil, along with others who I know are on the chat here, are all assisted with that. So the idea of the CEO Forum as part of the 100-day plan is absolutely fine, and that's very welcome. But what it gets you is the big end of town. It doesn't get you the common people. It doesn't get you the small businesses. And that's why you need the other business groups. And we've got to support that. So, you know, the plan currently doesn't have a return of or a resurrection of the business partnership group or some akin group to that takes it on. I was just deeply heartened by Ibu Shinta's presentation and the ideas that you're putting forward in the presentation of or creation of a marketing arm in Sydney, for Indonesian products. But the thing also that I've noticed in the presentations is every one of them was aimed at Australia going into Indonesia, and with the exception of Ibu Shinta, only a little bit has been coming in the other direction. And I want to emphasize that in the nature of comprehensive and partnership is we need Indonesia and your goods and businesses to be coming into Australia, to be assisting Australia to also develop. You know, while we may have our economic differences, in the end, according to earlier assessments prior to the COVID pandemic, is Indonesia was on track to be the 4th largest economy in the world by 2050. So we're only talking about a generation between now and then. At that same time, Bangladesh becomes number 18 in the world and Australia becomes number 28. You know, we drop out of the G20. Australia's economy, you know, diminishes in its importance in the world over time because of the rise. You know, it should be really welcome, the rise of nations in Southeast Asia. And we need to make sure that this comprehensive economic partnership is cemented now, because others will be watching this. And so we've got to build this up. And I'd like to just move through a few other ideas. Is firstly, while the conversation is about the comprehensive economic partnership, it's not the only way for us to do business. Firstly, Indonesia has had a tremendous effort in building special economic zones. And those zones offer some benefits which companies need to look at as well. And so all of our discussions need to be comprehensive as well, not just around the one agreement, but there are many agreements and there are many pathways that we can build that business opportunities together. The Indonesian Special Economic Zones, there's a map of those available of them, but they focus on tourism and manufacturing. So in Australia at the moment, the coronavirus pandemic outcomes and economic shutdown has sparked a conversation around the rekindling of manufacturing in Australia and the reshoring of supply chains, often targeted at China, but not exclusively. And you know, how do we have reliance and improved sovereignty is what goes on in the conversation. Now that's at odds with the idea that we should join our nations together. So collectively we have to overcome this nationalistic sentiment, sovereign sentiment, which is going on, and we have to demonstrate the value of what happens when you join things together. There's a lot going on around medical devices or on personal protective equipment, etc., and the supply chains related to those. So I think these are some really immediate things where we can join together. And this 100-day time frame is the right time frame for that. We had Australian firms who were encouraged by the Australian government to change their business model and to address the needs that Australia has. I'm not certain what the arrangements are in Indonesia, but I'd be fairly certain that the concept that we've got and had for a long time around the beef cattle partnerships, for example, why can't we develop those for other industries? You know, the same idea. We've got one from the grains industry around agri-food to do that, but we can be so much broader than that. We can be looking at health, we can be looking at digital, we can be looking at skills, etc., and have dedicated partnerships so that we can address those things for mutual benefit, not just for one benefit or another. The other issue which I'd like to raise with you a little bit is both nations have identified projects that they want, very serious projects. So in Australia, it's the Northern Australian emphasis, which was put on by this government, on trying to expand our opportunities in the north of Australia. In Indonesia, Indonesia has already identified potentially a new capital city. Well, these are enormous projects that we're talking about. So if I come back to Northern Australia, is again, the Australian government's emphasis, it placed $5 billion on the table to try and encourage investors. And I think a fair amount of that is still yet to be utilised. But it still targeted our historic industries. It was how do we shift our mining products and primary products out of Northern Australia? How do we shift more beef out of there, particularly in wet seasons, or can we extend that with improved roads, etc.? These are all important, of course, because they're existing industries and we need to make sure they remain successful. But we've also got new developing industries in those regions. The gas sector, for example, is an enormous gas production out of Northern Australia and into the region of Timor, for example. You've then got to have offtake markets for those. Again, targeted at the moment at industrial capitals in the North Asian region primarily, but also a huge conversation going on in Australia about domestic supply and you know, the capacity for our energy to be better priced than it is at the moment because of the difficulties in shifting it from where it is to the existing urban centres in Australia. So some of our opportunity is to in fact relook at our country and have a think about, could we develop new population centres in the north of Australia based on the access to global shipping lanes, proximity to international markets, and the abundance of energy and resources which are there? And I think that's a conversation well worth having in the context of Indonesia, because the two of us share the border right there. You know, how do we do that better? And Indonesia has the enormous population and the youth dividend, you know, which so many have spoken of before. So we'd like to be able to explore that. The other thing in the energy sector, there is solar and wind energy and possibly wave energy, which Australia has got abundance of again, and vastly better than anywhere in Asia. And there are people who are trying, both researchers and companies, to deal with a cross-border grid supply through a DC cable, underwater DC cable, with solar farms in Northern Australia, Western Australia, that can then supply, and the target is Singapore. And my question is, well, why are you targeting Singapore? You have to go past Indonesia to get there. there's another nation with 270 million people and, you know, high aspirations and presumably a very high need for energy right there. So I think there's a lot of opportunities which we're not yet thinking innovatively about because we're still set in the mindset of the past. But maybe the coronavirus pandemic has altered the framework for both of our nations to think about it. And I was deeply heartened by the conversations around digital. Now, return to that with the special economic zones is one of the ideas which the Business Partnership Group had was a digital special economic zone. This was a concept around Yogyakarta that was to develop at that time because the current range of special economic zones in Indonesia are focused on tourism and manufacturing, not on what the digital economy might bring to us both. Australia has an active digital economy agreement with Singapore. And I noticed as I was doing a little bit of research for this, there is a 2018 agreement with Indonesia and Australia on a digital forum, but I'm not too certain how far that's advanced. But the partnership agreement with Singapore could be emulated as a new opportunity for us to build upon our opportunities together in the digital space, be it e-delivery of health, commerce, education, now in fact even tourism. So the idea we could do that, or as Stephanie Fahey said, the concept of meeting, if we're constrained in our movement of people, we have to look for a new way to do that. So the digital delivery, I think, is just going to rise and rise from this point on. I mentioned the new city in, or capital city in Indonesia as well. And I think, well, why couldn't we look at that and build that in partnership? Already the model of Canberra has been mentioned in the aspirations from the Indonesian president when he visited here to say, well, this was a planned city in Canberra. How could they have a planned city also? And I think there's a lot of opportunities in that. And that combined with, you know, the conversations on energy and other things, and I've seen some of the chat going past around electric vehicles and other things like that. Why couldn't we both join together to make sure that the outcomes from that city development, although I'm sure it's a long way off, if we start to plan that now, we will have improved outcomes for the environment, improved outcomes for both economies, and we can share the knowledge that we each have to make that you know, a really fantastic place and opportunity. So I realise the time. I'll leave it there at that point, and hopefully we can have a chat with some of the audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. That now brings us to the Q&A portion of today's event. All our panellists, as you would have seen, have had a lot to share, so we've run a bit over time with the panel session. We've received many questions via the Q&A function, so thanks for that, and also many have been lodged in advance. With the time available, I'd like to select a couple of questions for each panellist and apologise to those whose questions we don't get to today. There has been, as Brian said, some great chat been going on in the margins, and we'll respond outside this session to as many of those questions that we can. First of all, the question has come in. If I could perhaps direct one to Stephanie first up. You've talked a lot about driving innovation. Of course, all of us in this webinar today are using an innovative means of communication and its relation to how we do international business. And I just wonder if you've got any examples that you might like to share with us of that sort of innovation, Stephanie.
Just coming off mute. I think there are a number of examples. One that's very timely, I think, is both Australia and Indonesia in the context of COVID-19 are focused on sovereignty, and particularly sovereignty around personal protective equipment and medical supplies. So I think every country in the world is thinking this through and what the future might hold. How do you actually create stockpiles? How do you have your own capability? Because we don't know whether there's going to be a post-COVID environment. This might be our new normal, as someone mentioned earlier. So how can we use innovation to actually fill the gaps. And one of the things that we've done in Australia is that a number of manufacturers of alcoholic drinks have actually pivoted to creating alcohol which will destroy the coronavirus. And there's been interest from those companies in Australia to actually work together with a joint venture partner in Indonesia to assist Indonesia to become self-sufficient in producing alcoholic wipes, the hand disinfectant. So it's actually a commercial outcome, but for a very specific purpose. So it's a win-win on both sides. So I think it's the innovation of company pivoting from what they used to produce to something that's in great demand at the moment all around the world, and we can actually work together with Indonesia to assist them to become self-sufficient as well. So I think it's a very timely example, and it's win-win, and it shows innovation by the business sector.
Thank you, Stephanie. Ibu Made, you talked in your slides about Indonesia having a trade deficit with Australia, and we just wonder if AICEPA will perhaps exacerbate this problem, or if it might have the opposite effect.
Sorry, yeah. Thank you for that question, Phil. But again, as in my presentation, I think the way we look at trade deficit is not just straight, okay, deficit is bad, but I think we are more interested in bringing both export and import, like trade part, import from Australia and export to Australia, so that our partnership so become higher in the rank, important trading partners for both. So, well, if we see, because by nature, trade agreement is eliminating tariff, right? We will see perhaps it could one way we could deepen the deficit, but in other side we can also narrow the gap as well. So it depends on how we see it, because the opportunity in terms of elimination of tariff are there. So this is why, again, the urge to the private sector, how can we make sure that the trade itself, hand in hand, export and import, not only one way. So certainly for us, we would like to see that improve. Thanks.
Thank you, Bumade. Ibu Shinta, when we worked together on the Business Partnership Group and its recommendations, it seemed that many Indonesian businesses had little knowledge and interest in the Australian market compared to other markets. And now that we have AICEPA agreement about to be implemented, how would you describe Indonesian business enthusiasm towards Australia? What have you seen change? And how do Indonesian business welcome the agreement, do you think?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, Phil, definitely there are more Indonesian businesses are aware, including the small, medium enterprises, because I think the Ministry of Trade also has been quite together with the Indonesian embassy in Australia has been very active. Also, the Australian embassy in Indonesia, in socializing. So I think definitely the interest is there. So the interest from business is definitely there. Of course, the COVID-19 situation right now puts business in a different paradigm, right? Because right now what we're looking now are changes. How we're going to change, transform ourselves. How business will transform, even model of business, even business that I used to be in a certain area may have to change completely to a different area. So this is actually the time when people are also rethinking in terms of business what to do. So we find what we find some of the challenges is, I think while there are a lot of interest to actually go there, the how, I think it was mentioned before, is the most crucial. They need hand-holding. This is, the more I work, especially with SMEs, it's basically like hand-holding. Starting from even packaging their their business or their products, you know, or, I mean, very, very specific. So I find that this is why I feel that we need to have specific task force to handle this, to get and work together closely with the government, because if we want to make this happen, we really need to show them the road, you know, and of course, financing is also a very big part. And this is interesting because, as you know, our government is right now focusing on the recovery of economy and providing a number of stimulus, including new working capital for SMEs. So I find, you know, this is the time that they need to grab, okay, if we are already in export, how can we now recover with the recovery of economy, which focus, you know, we want to do, where specific. And this is why it is very, very crucial that we take this opportunity of it to help them identify this opportunity with specific area and how can they actually get there. So we've been spending a lot of time looking into this. I think I really say that we need to work together, and also both with Phil and Bryan, we will intensify this cooperation. But yes, interest is definitely there. It's how to get them there.
Thank you, Shinta. Just with time getting away from us a little, this is possibly going to be the last question we'll be able to field during the webinar. But as I mentioned, we do have a record of all of the chat and questions that have come into us during the webinar. Bryan, if I could perhaps let you have the final word for today, and I'll make it a bit of a double barrel question, because there's been a lot of interest and excitement about the new capital city in Kalimantan and what opportunities that might represent for Australian and Indonesian firms to leverage off that opportunity and potentially under the banner of ISEPA. But also in the chat, there's been a lot of discussion about electric vehicles, a lot of excitement. Some people even contemplating that we could see the resurgence and the resurrection of the Holden brand through this. So I wonder if you could just share with us your comments on those two areas briefly.
It's I think there's an awful lot of fascinating things that we can contemplate. But firstly, with the city development, is we've certainly advocated in Australia, that is the Australian Chamber here, around Australia's role in climate change. And you know, there's a strong domestic conversation around what Australia needs to be doing, etc. But the point that we've been trying to press on is the strongest thing that Australia can do is help our neighbours to develop into a sustainable way, so that we're using, you know, energy. Australia supplies energy to the world. We are a huge energy superpower. Coal is one of those ones. We are not going to move away from coal for a long time. Indonesia is also fairly coal-based. But that's not to say we can't do other things. And the difficulty you've got with many other sources is transporting it. So the concept of being able to do so with a DC cable, or many DC cables, I don't know how many it needs, you know, where you can have the energy source in Australia through solar energy, for example, and supply it via a grid system into Southeast Asia, commencing with Indonesia. Why not? You know, I think it changes the dynamic. And the point of this is that we've got a very large, the problem with economics in Australia is that we have resources in one location and urban centres in another. And then you have very high transmission costs, etc., which go with it. We need not have that same dynamic, or that you can spread it across a much larger population centre and industrial demand, if you've got to focus on Indonesia. And the two of our nations using the comprehensive economic partnership idea is we now become a nation, or combined nation, of 300 million people, maybe slightly more. That's the same sort of scale as the United States or Europe. You know, it puts us on the global map, and it changes the dynamics of our cost structures, and that's what we've got to have a look at. So be it electric cars or anything else, is people are still going to have a demand for cars, although perhaps with ride sharing and other things, people get away from, you know, owning their own cars as well. But the notion of doing it and satisfying a global need together in a marketplace that is of sufficient scale that it is global scale, now we've got a different set of dynamics. And that's what we've got to have as the outcome from this partnership.
Thank you very much, Bryan. Before I formally close this event, I would like to pass back to Ambassador Legowo, who has some comments to make. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, Phil. It's just my closing remarks. I just want to thank once again our keynote speaker, all the panelists, all the participants for all the contributions. We fully understand the difficulties that we have, all the limitations that we have due to this global pandemic. But I'm very confident also, and I believe that this will not prevent us from working together with all the preparations. So once we are able to overcome this trying time, we will be able also to take all the benefit from the IASEPA at the fullest. So once again, thank you so much. God bless you all.
Thank you, Ambassador. Again, as the Ambassador has already thanked our panelists and speakers, I'd like to add my thanks to that and all of you for participating wherever you might be today. Thanks to Ambassador Legowo again and the Indonesian Embassy for partnering with the Australia-Indonesia Business Council on this event. And as we've hoped, it's been a lively exchange of ideas between such knowledgeable and passionate people, all working in their respective roles to unlock the potential of this historic new agreement, IASEPA, between our countries. Thank you and good day. Sampai jumpa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Dubes, Phil, Bu Shinta.
Thank you, Pak Ade.
Bryan,
Thank
Pak
you,
Wisnu.
Thank you, Pak Wisnu. Thank you, Pak Bryan.